Okay, so let's continue with part 2 of our annotated bibliography. So let's look more closely at each citation. We talked about the introduction and the background. So here's my first source. It's a longish one. A decade after the Tokyo sarin attack, a review of neurological follow-up of the victims. And here's the rest of the citation, right? A summary is just what we practiced in the literature module, where you read an article and tell me what the article is about. And you need to introduce the authors. So here's my summary. After extensive testing of a number of the survivors of the 1995 sarin gas attacks, Hoffman et al., that's these folks, Hoffman, Eisencraft, etc., 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 2007, because that's what we do in APA. We'll talk more about this in another lecture where on how to introduce your sources with APA. It's a little different than MLA, but we introduce the author's name and include the date. We don't do that in MLA, but we do it in APA. All right. They found that the largest remaining problems were psychological rather than physiological, with post-traumatic stress disorder being the most widespread disorder. The doctors argue for long-term monitoring of victims of mass casualty events, particularly for motor impairment and PTSD. That's what the article is about. All right, just a couple of sentences telling what it's about. In my next paragraph, Hoffman and his team have published widely in the field of bioterrorism, particularly from a medical standpoint. The author's suggestions that PTSD is a likelihood in such horrific events is a sound one, and the suggestion that follow-ups be part of the emergency health care system is valid, if not well articulated. How would such a plan be carried out? This is my question, right? This is my assessment that it's not well articulated. In other words, it was hard for me to figure out the argument that they were making. How did I know that they had published widely in the field of bioterrorism? I Googled them, right? So what you're doing is telling the reader that the function of an annotated bibs, here's a whole bunch of sources. I'm going to tell you what the source is about, and I'm going to tell you if it's worth your time, right? That's what you're doing. You're letting the reader know what is the source about and what are the problems you see with the source. So this is asking you to engage more with the source than just reading it and trying to find something you can cite in your paper. You need to slow down and think about the source. Is it a good one? If how do you know it's a good one? Why is it a good one? Why is it not a good one? What problems did you have with it? You notice there is in your summary and in your analysis, there are no quotations, right? Nothing's been quoted. There is no first person. There's no second person. These are formal documents, okay? Then you would go down to your next source. You have your citation. You summarize it. All right, and I summarized it a little differently this time. I tried to do something different so you'd have some options. The three authors, 2013, right, that's when it was published. Again, that is a APA convention. Review the laws that have come out of the sarin gas attacks, blah, blah, blah. It's enhanced to, they review the history of changes and countermeasures against such instruments. All right, so okay, here's what I wanted to show you. In my analysis, I talk about how I read it and what sense it made, etc. What I decided it's a valuable reference source. In the citation itself, titles are, we talked about in an earlier video, only the first letter of the first word of the title is capitalized unless there are proper names, etc., like the name of Japan, right? That's a proper noun and needs to be capitalized. And you notice there's no quotation marks. In our actual essays themselves, and again, we'll practice this more later, you do use the quotation marks, and you do capitalize the article name just like you would in MLA. I don't know why they do it differently within the paper than they do in the citation in APA, but they just do, and you need to do that properly, okay? Because a lot of instructors will really slam you for not following the format correctly, okay? So then our final citation, summary, and analysis. And you notice in each one the author's names are introduced properly, okay, and the date. All right, so what it's going to look like when you're done, when we take all the formatting out, we have our introduction, And your introduction is sort of telling us what is this annotated bibliography about, all right? This bibliography is about articles and the effects they show in psychology, national security, and disaster preparedness. Each one of my articles referenced one of those effects. And that's a nice way to organize your introduction. So if you have 3 articles on 3 different effects, it's nice to list those 3 effects there. Then I have some background information so you'll know what the topic is about. I have source 1, and you notice these are all in alphabetical order though, right? Hoffman, Okamura, and Yokoyama. So they're in alphabetical order, just like a works cited page always is, right? And for each one, you have a citation, a summary, a analysis. Citation, summary, analysis, citation, summary, analysis. All right? And that is what your science annotated bibliography should look like.